On June 6, 1944, a momentous event unfolded that would forever alter the course of history. D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy, was the culmination of months of meticulous planning, strategic deception, and immense logistical preparation. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, as the combined forces of the United States, Britain, Canada, and several other Allied nations launched the largest amphibious assault in history. The seeds of this invasion were planted years earlier. Since the early 1940s, the Soviet Union had borne the brunt of the war against Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front, suffering immense casualties. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin had repeatedly pressured his Western allies, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States and Winston Churchill of Britain, to open a second front in Western Europe. However, the Western allies, wary of a premature engagement, first sought to weaken the Axis through campaigns in North Africa and Italy. By 1943, the tide of war had shifted. The Soviet Union was gaining ground in the East, and the Allies recognized that to prevent Soviet dominance over the entirety of Europe after the war, they needed to liberate Western Europe themselves. Thus, at a conference in Tehran in 1943, the decision was made. The Allies would launch an invasion of France in the spring of 1944. Executing an amphibious invasion of this scale required overcoming extraordinary challenges. The first decision was where to land. The logical choice seemed to be Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. However, Calais was also the most fortified, as the Germans anticipated an attack there. Instead, the Allies chose Normandy, a region with more favorable terrain and an element of surprise. But choosing Normandy required an elaborate deception plan, Operation Fortitude, to convince the Germans that the invasion would happen elsewhere. Fake armies, dummy landing craft, and deceptive radio transmissions were used to mislead the enemy. The logistics of the operation were staggering. Millions of tons of equipment and supplies had to be transported across the English Channel. The Allies even designed and constructed massive portable harbors, Mulberry Harbors, to facilitate the landing and movement of troops once the beaches were secured. Specialized tanks, nicknamed Hobart's Funnies, were developed to deal with obstacles on the beaches. Thousands of landing craft were built to transport the invasion force, which included over 150,000 troops from various nations. Originally scheduled for early May 1944, the invasion was postponed to June to allow for further preparation. Finally, on June 4th, the first wave of troops began boarding their vessels, ready to embark on what would become one of the most significant military operations in history. But then, the weather turned. A fierce storm swept across the English Channel, making the planned landing impossible. Postponing the invasion further risked exposing the massive buildup of troops and supplies. As uncertainty loomed, a crucial weather report arrived. A brief window of better conditions was expected on June 6. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower made a fateful decision. D-Day was on. On the night of June 5th, the first phase of the invasion began. Thousands of paratroopers from the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, along with British and Canadian airborne forces, were dropped behind enemy lines to secure key roads, bridges, and positions. However, due to poor weather and enemy anti-aircraft fire, many paratroopers were scattered, landing miles from their intended drop zones. Some found themselves alone in the dark, deep in enemy territory. Others drowned in flooded marshes, or were captured before they could regroup. Despite the chaos, small units managed to gather, seize objectives, and disrupt German defenses. Meanwhile, over 6,000 ships carrying Allied forces set sail across the turbulent channel, escorted by minesweepers clearing a path. As dawn approached on June 6th, naval bombardments began. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers unleashed a relentless barrage on German fortifications along the Normandy coast. The objective was to weaken enemy defenses before the infantry landed. However, many of the bombs and shells missed their targets, leaving much of the German resistance intact. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave of American troops hit the beaches. Utah Beach, the westernmost landing site, was initially chaotic. Strong currents had pushed the troops off course, landing them over a mile from their designated position. But in a stroke of luck, the area where they landed was less heavily defended than expected. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., the oldest man in the invasion force at 56, famously declared, "We'll start the war from right here." He quickly adapted to the unexpected situation, leading his men inland. Utah Beach was secured with relatively light casualties. Omaha Beach, however, was a nightmare. The pre-landing bombardment had failed to destroy the heavily fortified German defenses. As landing craft approached, they were met with a hailstorm of machine gun fire, artillery shells, and mortars. Many soldiers were killed before even stepping onto the beach. Those who made it to shore found themselves pinned down, unable to advance due to relentless enemy fire. Chaos reigned as units were mixed up, officers were killed, and communication broke down. It seemed that the invasion at Omaha might fail. But amid the carnage, acts of incredible bravery turned the tide. Small groups of soldiers found gaps in the enemy's defenses and pushed forward. American Rangers scaled the cliffs at Point du Hoc to destroy German artillery that threatened the beaches. Naval warships, seeing the dire situation, moved dangerously close to shore to provide more precise bombardment. By the afternoon, despite suffering immense losses, the Americans managed to break through the German defenses and push inland. Elsewhere, the British and Canadian forces faced their own fierce battles. At Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches, resistance varied. British forces at Gold Beach overcame stiff opposition and moved quickly to capture key towns. Canadian troops at Juno Beach endured intense fighting, but ultimately advanced further inland than any other Allied force. At Sword Beach, the British successfully linked up with airborne troops, securing vital roads for the push towards Cannes. By nightfall on June 6, the Allies had secured a foothold in Normandy. The cost had been immense. Over 4,000 Allied troops were killed, and thousands more were wounded or missing. But the invasion had succeeded. The German forces, caught off guard and struggling to mobilize reinforcements, were unable to repel the Allied advance. D-Day was only the beginning of the long and grueling Battle of Normandy, which would last for weeks as the Allies fought to break through German defenses and liberate France. Yet, the success of June 6 ensured that Hitler's dream of domination was crumbling. The invasion of Normandy marked the turning point in World War II, leading to the eventual liberation of Western Europe and the final defeat of Nazi Germany less than a year later. The courage, sacrifice, and determination displayed on D-Day remain a testament to the resilience of those who fought for freedom. The beaches of Normandy, once stained with blood, stand today as a solemn reminder of the cost of victory and the bravery of those who risked everything to secure it.